on this Tuesday, October the 2nd. I'm Yumna Naufal. These are today's headlines. Families of Arsel captives hold a sit-in in the Grand Sarai to protest the state's procrastination regarding the release of their relatives. The cabinet convenes to discuss among the issues the proposal by Interior Minister Nuhad Mashnout to relocate the Syrian refugees in Arsel to a camp outside the border town. And ISIS launched an attack on Iraqi bases in two western towns that leave at least 17 members of the security forces and 40 jihadists dead. The families of Arsel captives held a sit-in near the Grand Sarai to protest the state's procrastination regarding the release of their relatives who were abducted by Islamist gunmen in August. We warn of further delay in resolving the case of our sons, the relatives told reporters gathering in Riyadh al-Sulh Square, demanding swift negotiations with jihadists who are taking positions on the outskirts of the northern border town. The protest coincided with a cabinet session at the Grand Sarai to press Prime Minister Tamam Salam and ministers to adopt a decision to exchange the kidnapped soldiers and policemen with Rumi prison inmates. Meanwhile, Health Minister Wael Abu Faoud stressed after meeting protesters that the political powers are keen to resolve the abduction ordeal, considering that the case is progressing positively. And so, as we said, the cabinet convened as relatives of the abducted soldiers and policemen demonstrated outside the Grand Sarai to press the government to release Islamist prisoners in exchange for their loved ones. Two topics from outside the 60-item agenda took priority: a proposal to establish camps for Syrian refugees and the negotiations taking place through a Qatari mediator to secure the release of some 21 captive personnel held by Nusra Front and ISIS. The proposal by Interior Minister Nuhad Mashnout to relocate the Syrian refugees in Arsel to a camp outside the border town is expected to draw heated debates. However, Foreign Minister Jabran Basil from Aoun's Free Patriotic Movement said that the establishment of camps for Syrian refugees inside Lebanese territory requires a cabinet decision and that it is not going to happen today or later. Interior Minister Nuhad al-Mashnout stated that Hezbollah is demonstrating openness regarding resolving the situation in the northeastern bordered town of Arsel. He told the Future newspaper the ongoing discussions with the party are positive and further meetings are necessary with it in the future in order to reach solutions. He made his remarks in light of a meeting he held with Social Affairs Minister Rashid Derbas, the head of the Loyalty to the Resistance Bloc MP Mohamed Raad, and MP Mohamed Fnish. Amateur video posted on a social media website purported to show Islamic State fighters on the outskirts of the predominantly Kurdish border town of Kobani in Syria, which has been under siege by the militants for more than 2 weeks. The footage shows a number of men dressed in military fatigues taking their positions on a hill above what is said to be the town of Kobani, preparing to attack. For most of the video, they can be heard speaking Russian with pronounced Caucasus accents, discussing the terrain in front of them. The United States has been carrying out these strikes in Iraq against IS since July and in Syria since last week with the help of Arab allies. Britain and France have also struck Islamic State targets in Iraq. The Syrian Observatory for Human Rights, which monitors the war, said Islamic State have taken control now of 325 of the 354 villages around Kobani. ISIS insurgents in Iraq have carried out mass executions, abducted women and girls as sex slaves, and used children as fighters in systematic violations that may amount to war crimes, according to the United Nations. In a report made official based on 500 interviews, it also said Iraqi government airstrikes on the Sunni militants have had significant civilian death by hitting villages, a school, and hospitals in violation of international law. The report said at least 9,500 civilians had been killed and almost 18,000 wounded so far through September, well over half of them since ISIS insurgents began seizing large parts of northern Iraq in early June. Now, the Islamist forces have committed gross human rights violations and violence of an increasing sectarian nature against groups including Christians and Yazidis in a widening conflict that has forced 1.8 million Iraqis to flee their homes. So ISIS launched attacks on Iraqi bases in two western towns that left at least 17 members of the security forces and 40 jihadists dead. According to security and medical sources on the ground, 7 policemen and 4 soldiers were killed when the fighters attacked the police headquarters in the town of Hit, while at least 6 federal forces were killed in an assault on a major army base in Ramadi. 20 ISIS attackers were killed in each attack, senior officers said, adding that 5 jihadists were still holed up in a building in Hit, while the Ramadi attack had been successfully repulsed. And as Eid al-Adha approaches, many Egyptians have been buying sheep and cows to sacrifice, whilst others rely on the kindness of strangers for their holiday meals. For Muslims, Eid al-Adha, or the Feast of the Sacrifice, honors the willingness of Abraham to sacrifice his own son Ismail in submission to God. Muslims across the world slaughter animals and feed the poor to seek God's forgiveness during the holiday. In Cairo's Imam al-Shafi'i Cemetery, a volunteer at World My Home Foundation was packing meat to distribute to the needy during the holiday. The volunteer, named Midhat Hamid, said that the foundation gives to more than 600 families living in the cemetery area. The charity distributes the packages of meat before Eid begins to reach the families no later than the first day. Muhammad Abdelati, who lives with his family in the cemetery, said people like him are desperate. Eid al-Adha this year is due to start on Saturday, October 4th, and will last 4 days. Coming up, U.S. Secret Service Director Julia Pearson resigns under fire after a series of security breaches protecting President Obama. Stay with us. Welcome back. You're watching the 4:20 o'clock news on Future TV. Protesters in Hong Kong have demanded the city's leader meet a deadline to resign as China warns the United States against meddling in its internal affairs. Demonstrators who have shut down central areas of the southern Chinese city for 4 days have given Chief Executive Long Chong-ying until midnight to step down or face escalated action, including the occupation of government buildings. With the protests showing no signs of waning, China's Foreign Minister Wang Yi issued the warning to the U.S. and other foreign countries not to interfere. Speaking in Washington, the foreign minister added that Beijing would not tolerate illegal acts that violate public order. The week-long street protests by thousands of demonstrators pressing for electoral reforms in Hong Kong are the biggest challenge to Beijing's authority since China took control of the former British colony in 1997. Parents in Dallas, Texas and the United States started pulling their children out of school after the governor, Rick Perry, said that some school-age children have come in contact with the first patient diagnosed with the deadly Ebola virus in the United States. Tasby Middle School is one of 4 schools in Dallas Independent School District where the 5 students who came into contact with the Ebola patient go to school. Texas health officials said that up to 18 people, including 5 children, had contact with the Ebola patient after he traveled to the United States from Liberia in late September. The children had gone to school early this week but have since been sent home and are being monitored for symptoms. Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu hit back at the White House after Washington criticized Israeli plans to build thousands more settler homes in East Jerusalem. Public radio quoted him as telling U.S. President Barack Obama in talks to study the facts and details before making statements about the settlement plan.
I think we also recognize that we have to find ways to change the status quo so that both Israeli citizens are safe in their own homes and school children in their schools from the possibility of rocket fire, but also that we don't have the tragedy of Palestinian children being killed as well. And so we'll discuss extensively both the situation of rebuilding Gaza, but also how can we find a more sustainable peace between Israelis and Palestinians. And we'll also have an opportunity to discuss the progress that's being made with respect to dealing with Iran's nuclear program, which obviously has been a high priority for not only Israel, but also the United States and the world community.
Mr. President, first I want to thank you. I want to thank you for the unflinching support you gave Israel during our difficult days, the difficult summer we had, expressed in so many ways, but also in an additional installment of support for Iron Dome, which has saved so many lives, saved many lives across the board. And I thank you for that, and for the continuous bond of friendship that is so strong between Israel and the United States. Israel fully supports your effort and your leadership to defeat ISIS. We think everybody should support this, and even more critical is our shared goal of preventing Iran from becoming a military nuclear power. As you know, Mr. President, Iran seeks a deal that would lift the tough sanctions that you worked so hard to put in place and leave it as a threshold nuclear power. And I fervently hope that under your leadership that would not happen.
U.S. Secret Service Director Julia Pearson resigned under fire after a series of security lapses came to light involving deep protection for President Barack Obama. Homeland Security Secretary Jay Johnson announced Pearson's resignation and said Joseph Clancy, a veteran of the agency, was named acting director. White House spokesman Josh Earnest said Obama had called Pearson to express his appreciation to her for her long years of service.
This afternoon, the President had the opportunity to telephone Director Pearson to express his appreciation for her service to the agency and to the country. She dedicated more than 30 years of her life to the United States Secret Service and to the important work that they do over there. As I mentioned yesterday, she spent several hours in front of the cameras yesterday answering difficult questions from members of Congress. In the context of that interaction, she took responsibility for the shortcomings of the agency that she led, and she took responsibility for fixing them. And that, quite simply, I think, is a testament to her professionalism and to her character. Well, Director Pearson offered her resignation today because she believed that it was in the best interests of the agency to which she has dedicated her career. The Secretary agreed with that assessment. The President did as well. Over the last several days, we've seen recent and accumulating reports raising questions about the performance of the agency. And the President concluded that new leadership of that agency was required.
I'm here today to address the concern that we all share following the incident of September 19th at the White House. It's clear that our security plan was not properly executed. This is unacceptable, and I take full responsibility, and I will make sure that it does not happen again.
This marks the end of our bulletin for today. Now for a reminder of our top stories. The families of our cell captives hold a sit-in near the Grand Sarai to protest the state's procrastination regarding the release of their relatives who were abducted by Islamist gunmen in August. The cabinet convenes to discuss among the issues the proposal by Interior Minister Nuhal Mashnouk to relocate the Syrian refugees in Arsel to a camp outside the border town. And ISIS launched attacks on Iraqi bases in 2 western towns that leave at least 17 of the members of security forces and 40 jihadists dead. Those wrap up your Thursday headlines live on Future Television in Beirut. I'm Yumna Naufal wishing you a good night. Take care.